My sister's rich in-laws called me low class. Minutes later, my Navy commander brother made them regret it. My name is Elena, and if someone had told me that the most humiliating day of my life would also become the day everyone who looked down on me would be forced to bow their heads in shame, I never would have believed them. What happened that night at my sister's wedding changed everything I thought I knew about family, wealth, and what real power actually looks like. Before I tell you how one sentence destroyed an entire room full of arrogant millionaires, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up believing that kindness mattered more than money. My parents worked hard every single day, and although we never had the luxury cars, giant mansions, or country club memberships that many wealthy families around Seattle enjoyed, our home was always full of love. We celebrated birthdays around our old dining table, laughed through difficult times, and learned that respect was something you earned by the way you treated people, not by the balance in your bank account. My older sister, Sophia, was different. She had always dreamed of living a glamorous life. As kids, while I imagined traveling the world or helping people, Sophia spent hours flipping through fashion magazines, pointing at expensive jewelry and beachfront homes. She used to tell me, "One day I'm going to marry rich, and I'll never have to worry about money again." Back then, I thought she was joking. Years passed, and somehow that dream became her entire identity. When she met Daniel Whitmore at a charity gala in downtown Seattle, she believed fate had finally rewarded her. Daniel came from one of the wealthiest business families in the city. The Whitmores owned real estate, investment firms, luxury hotels, and enough businesses that people often recognized their last name before they recognized their faces. To Sophia, marrying Daniel meant entering the world she had always wanted. To Daniel's family, it meant allowing someone beneath their social class to enter their bloodline. They never said it directly in the beginning. People from families like theirs rarely do. Instead, they smiled politely while making comments carefully disguised as compliments. "Oh, your family is so humble. It must be refreshing growing up without all the responsibilities wealth brings. I'm sure this lifestyle will take some getting used to." Every sentence sounded friendly. Every word carried an insult. My parents noticed it. I noticed it. Even Sophia noticed it. But she ignored every warning because she loved Daniel, or at least the life she believed came with him. Daniel himself wasn't openly cruel at first. He was charming, well-dressed, and always knew exactly what to say in front of other people. But every now and then, tiny cracks would appear. He once laughed when I mentioned I still drove my old Honda. "You should really upgrade," he said casually. "People judge you by what you drive." I smiled politely. "I'd rather be judged by how I treat people." He chuckled as though I had told a childish joke. "You'll understand when you're older." I was only 2 years younger than him. It wasn't about age. It was about status. The closer the wedding came, the more obvious everything became. Every meeting with Daniel's family felt like an audition we could never pass. The flowers weren't expensive enough. Our clothes weren't elegant enough. Our manners weren't sophisticated enough. Even the gifts we brought were quietly criticized after we left. Still, my parents swallowed every insult. Not because they were weak. Because they wanted Sophia to be happy. I did the same. Whenever Margaret Whitmore, the woman who would soon become Sophia's mother-in-law, made one of her passive-aggressive remarks, I simply smiled and changed the subject. Margaret had perfected the art of making people feel small. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. One look from her perfectly made-up face could make an entire room feel unwelcome. She carried herself like a queen inspecting commoners. Every designer outfit, every diamond bracelet, every expensive handbag seemed carefully selected to remind everyone exactly where she believed she belonged. Far above the rest of us. A week before the wedding, Sophia invited me over to help organize some last-minute decorations. She looked exhausted. Dark circles had formed beneath her eyes despite the expensive skincare products covering her vanity. "You okay?" I asked. She forced a smile. "I'm just stressed." "Wedding stress?" She hesitated before answering. "Margaret keeps changing everything." "What do you mean?" "She says our side of the guest list looks ordinary." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means she doesn't want certain people sitting near their VIP guests." I stared at her. "She's assigning seats based on income?" Sophia looked away. "It's complicated." "No," I replied quietly. "It's actually very simple." She sighed. "Please, Elena. Don't start anything. Just get through the day." I nodded because I loved my sister. But something deep inside me didn't feel right. No wedding should require people to hide who they are just to satisfy someone else's ego. The morning of the ceremony arrived with clear skies stretching over Seattle's waterfront. The venue looked like something from a movie. A luxury resort overlooking Elliott Bay had been transformed into a breathtaking display of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and elegant gold decorations. Luxury cars lined the entrance while photographers captured every arriving guest dressed in designer suits and evening gowns worth more than my monthly salary. As I stepped out of my car, I took a deep breath. "This day is about Sophia," I whispered to myself. "Nothing else matters." I truly believed that. I had no idea that before the evening was over, the same people who couldn't stand to have me sitting beside them would desperately owe their lives to someone carrying my last name. I arrived several hours before the ceremony because Sophia had asked me to help with the guests. Despite everything that had happened over the past few months, I wanted her wedding to be perfect. She was still my sister, and I loved her enough to put my own feelings aside. Inside the ballroom, everything sparkled. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting thousands of tiny lights across polished marble floors. Fresh white orchids and roses decorated every table, while enormous glass windows overlooked the Seattle waterfront, where the evening sun painted the water in shades of gold and orange. It was breathtaking. Servers in crisp uniforms carried silver trays filled with champagne, while a string quartet rehearsed softly near the stage. The room buzzed with conversations between CEOs, investors, politicians, and socialites who all seemed to know one another. I straightened one of the flower arrangements and smiled as another group of guests entered. "Welcome," I said warmly. "The ceremony will begin shortly. Your table is right this way." Most people thanked me politely. Some barely acknowledged my existence. A few looked at my simple navy blue dress and immediately assumed I was part of the catering staff. I didn't bother correcting them. Clothes have an interesting way of revealing more about the person looking than the person wearing them. About 30 minutes before the ceremony, Sophia walked over in her stunning white wedding gown. She looked absolutely beautiful, but the smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. "You've been working non-stop," she said, squeezing my hand. "I told you I'd help." "I know." For a moment, it felt like we were kids again. Just two sisters standing together. "I couldn't have done this without you," she whispered. I hugged her carefully, making sure not to wrinkle her dress. "You deserve to be happy." She nodded, but before she could say another word, someone called her name. "Sophia." "Margaret." Even from across the ballroom, her voice carried authority. She approached with perfect posture, wearing an emerald green designer gown that probably cost more than my car. Diamonds glittered around her neck, and every confident step announced that she believed she owned the room. "My dear," Margaret said to Sophia without even glancing at me, "the governor's wife has arrived. Come greet her immediately." Sophia looked apologetically toward me. "I'll be back." "It's okay." She hurried away. Margaret finally turned toward me. Her eyes slowly scanned me from head to toe. That familiar look. The one that always made me feel like I was being inspected instead of seen. I assume you finished directing guests. Almost. Good. She paused. Just remember not to interfere with our VIP seating. Our? She smiled politely. The Whitmore family. I simply nodded. There was no point arguing. As more guests arrived, the ballroom filled quickly. Laughter echoed through the room as cameras flashed from every direction. Expensive perfumes mixed with the scent of fresh flowers, creating an atmosphere that felt elegant, yet strangely cold. I continued helping elderly guests find their seats. One older gentleman thanked me warmly. "You've been the kindest person here all evening." His words caught me off guard. "Thank you, sir. I hope your family appreciates you." I smiled. "So do I." He had no idea how deeply those words would stay with me. Eventually, nearly every seat had been filled. The ceremony was only minutes away. I looked around and realized I hadn't actually sat down myself. There was one empty chair near the front, beside my parents and just a few seats away from Sophia's bridal party. Since I was immediate family, I naturally assumed that was where I belonged. I walked toward it quietly. My mother looked relieved to see me. "There you are," she whispered. "Sit down, sweetheart." I smiled and reached for the chair. That's when I heard the sharp click of high heels behind me. "Excuse me." The room seemed to grow quieter. I turned around. Margaret stood only a few feet away. Her expression was anything but friendly. She looked directly at the chair I was about to take. Then back at me. Her voice wasn't loud. "At first. I don't believe that seat is for you." I blinked. "I'm sitting with my family." "No." She stepped closer. "Our family sits here." The emphasis on the word "our" landed like a slap. "My parents are right here," I replied calmly. She folded her arms. "Your parents were allowed to remain because removing them now would create unnecessary attention." Several nearby guests had stopped talking. I could feel their eyes shifting toward us. Margaret didn't seem to care. In fact, she almost seemed to enjoy having an audience. She looked me up and down with open disgust. Then, loud enough for half the ballroom to hear, she said, "How dare you think you belong beside us?" Conversation stopped completely. Champagne glasses froze halfway to people's lips. Musicians lowered their instruments. Every eye in the room turned toward us. Margaret's voice echoed across the ballroom. "You are nothing more than an ordinary lower-class girl." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. In our family's social circle, there is no place for poor people pretending they belong among successful families. Nobody spoke. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended me. She pointed toward the back of the ballroom. "If you insist on staying, you can sit back there." A few uncomfortable laughs escaped from some of Daniel's relatives. Someone whispered. I wondered when she'd finally say it. Margaret wasn't finished. "Actually." She smiled coldly. "Perhaps it would be better if you simply left." I looked toward Daniel. He stood only a few yards away. Watching. Listening. Saying. Nothing. Not a single word. The man who claimed to love my sister couldn't even defend her younger sister from public humiliation. Then I looked at Sophia. Her face had gone pale. For a split second, I thought she might speak. I silently begged her with my eyes. "Please. Say something. Anything." Instead, she slowly lowered her head. She didn't defend me. She didn't argue. She didn't even look at me anymore. I turned toward my parents. My father's fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. My mother was crying silently. But neither of them moved. Not because they agreed with Margaret. Because they were terrified that if they challenged her now, Sophia's marriage would collapse before it even began. That realization hurt more than Margaret's words ever could. I suddenly understood that everyone I loved had made the same impossible choice. Protect Sophia. Or protect me. And they had chosen her. Without saying another word, I forced a smile that hid the tears already filling my eyes. "I'm sorry," I whispered. No one answered. I slowly stepped away from the chair. Away from my parents. Away from my sister. Away from the family section. The silence behind me was unbearable. Each step toward the ballroom doors felt heavier than the last. No one stopped me. No one called my name. As I pushed open the massive glass doors, a cold Seattle rain greeted me. Within seconds, I was soaked. But somehow, the rain hurt far less than what had just happened inside. The cold rain hit my face the moment I stepped outside, but I didn't even try to find shelter. I walked down the stone steps leading to the entrance of the resort and sat there alone, letting the water soak through my dress and hair. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself to cry. Not because Margaret had called me poor. Money had never defined who I was. What shattered my heart was watching my own family stand there in complete silence. I understood why they had done it. They were trying to protect Sophia. But understanding something doesn't make it hurt any less. I wrapped my arms around myself as the rain poured harder. Inside the ballroom, faint music began playing again. The ceremony was moving forward. As if nothing had happened. I looked out across Elliott Bay. The city lights reflected off the dark water, creating a peaceful scene that stood in painful contrast to the storm inside my heart. I closed my eyes. Memories of my childhood drifted through my mind. Sophia and I used to race bicycles through our neighborhood every summer. She always cheated. I always pretended not to notice. She'd steal my favorite sweaters without asking. I'd complain for exactly 5 minutes before laughing about it. No matter how different we became as adults. She had always been my big sister. That's why tonight hurt so much. A few minutes later, the ballroom erupted into applause. I guessed the ceremony had started. For a brief moment, I considered getting up and driving home. There was no reason for me to stay. Clearly. No one inside wanted me there. I reached into my purse for my car keys. Then I heard something strange. A loud crash. Not the sound of a dropped plate. Something much heavier. Glass exploding. My head snapped toward the entrance. Another crash followed. Then shouting. At first, I assumed someone had accidentally knocked over one of the decorative displays. But then came the screams. Real screams. Terrified screams. Women crying. Men yelling. The music stopped instantly. What is happening? I whispered. More glass shattered. Someone inside shouted. Everybody get down. Another voice screamed. They have guns. I froze. For a second, my mind refused to process what I had just heard. Then people started pounding against the locked glass doors from the inside. I jumped to my feet. Guests were running in every direction. Some were crawling beneath tables. Others were desperately trying to hide behind pillars. The elegant wedding reception had transformed into complete chaos within seconds. Through the rain-covered glass, I could barely make out dark figures moving through the ballroom. They weren't guests. They wore black tactical clothing. Face coverings. Body armor. And each one carried what looked like military-style rifles. One of them fired several shots into the ceiling. The deafening blasts echoed across the waterfront. People dropped to the floor screaming. Another armed man overturned a table with one powerful kick. Champagne bottles shattered across the marble floor. Crystal glasses exploded everywhere. The wedding cake crashed to the ground. Someone yelled. "Nobody moves." Another shouted. "Seal every exit." Within moments, every entrance appeared blocked. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I instinctively reached for my phone. No signal. The network was overloaded. I tried dialing 911 anyway. The call wouldn't connect. Inside, panic spread faster than wildfire. Guests who had spent the evening boasting about billion-dollar investments now hid beneath tables like frightened children. Designer suits. Diamond necklaces. Luxury watches. None of them meant anything anymore. Fear had made everyone equal. One of the attackers grabbed a security guard and slammed him against a wall before ripping away his radio. Another forced several guests to kneel in the center of the ballroom. I recognized Daniel immediately. The confident smile he wore all afternoon had completely disappeared. His expensive tuxedo was soaked with spilled champagne as he crawled beneath one of the dining tables. He wasn't thinking about protecting anyone. He was trying to save himself. Margaret looked even worse. Only minutes earlier she had spoken to everyone as though she owned the world. Now she clung desperately to another woman, crying uncontrollably. "My son! My son!" She kept screaming Daniel's name over and over. One of the armed men pointed his rifle directly toward her. "Quiet!" She immediately covered her mouth. Not another word escaped. I stood frozen outside, completely helpless. I wanted to do something. Anything. But what could I possibly do against heavily armed criminals? Then I noticed something else. These weren't ordinary robbers. They weren't taking jewelry. They weren't demanding wallets. They were searching for someone. One of the masked men grabbed Daniel's father, Richard Whitmore, by the collar and dragged him into the middle of the ballroom. Richard struggled violently. "I don't know what you're talking about." The attacker slammed him onto the floor. "You stole millions from people who don't forgive." Richard's face turned ghost white. "I can pay you." The man laughed. This stopped being about money a long time ago. Several of the attackers surrounded him. Guests watched in horror. Another criminal spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You thought you could steal from our organization." He leaned down until his face was only inches from Richard's. "And hide behind your wealthy friends?" Richard couldn't answer. His silence revealed everything. The whispers spread through the terrified crowd. What is he talking about? Did Richard really steal from them? Oh my God. One elderly businessman slowly shook his head. I knew his company was under investigation. Suddenly, everything started making sense. This wasn't a random attack. Someone had come specifically for Daniel's family. Every innocent guest trapped inside had become collateral damage. The attackers forced Richard onto his knees. Margaret broke free from the crowd and stumbled toward her husband. "Please. Leave him alone." One of the gunmen shoved her backward so hard she fell onto the marble floor. Daniel remained hidden beneath the table. He never came out to help his own mother. Watching him, I couldn't help remembering how proudly he had stood beside Margaret while she humiliated me less than an hour earlier. Now, he couldn't even stand on his own feet. Suddenly, in the distance beyond the pouring rain, I heard the unmistakable sound of powerful engines approaching fast. The sound grew louder with every passing second. At first, I thought it was the local police responding to dozens of emergency calls. But this was different. These engines were heavier, more powerful, moving with a level of precision that immediately caught my attention. Bright headlights cut through the curtain of rain as three matte black military tactical vehicles turned sharply into the resort entrance. They didn't arrive with flashing sirens. They didn't create unnecessary noise. They simply moved with absolute purpose. The vehicles screeched to a halt only a few yards from where I stood. Before I could even process what was happening, the doors flew open. One after another, heavily armed military operators stepped out. Every movement was disciplined. Every command was short and precise. Their tactical gear bore the unmistakable insignia of the United States Navy. My heart skipped a beat. Navy Special Warfare. Navy SEALs. I had only ever seen teams move like that in documentaries. Within seconds, they had spread across the entrance, securing every angle while communicating through headsets. One operator glanced toward the shattered ballroom windows. Hostiles confirmed. Another nodded. Multiple civilians inside. A third checked a digital tablet. No visual on the primary target. Everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to breathe. Then, the rear door of the last vehicle opened. A single officer stepped out. Unlike the others, he wasn't dressed in tactical combat gear. He wore the immaculate white dress uniform of the United States Navy. Even in the pouring rain, the uniform looked flawless. Rows of colorful ribbons covered his chest. Several military medals reflected the flashing emergency lights now appearing in the distance. Gold buttons gleamed beneath the entrance lights. His posture was perfectly straight. Confident. Commanding. The gold oak leaves and insignia on his shoulders immediately revealed he was a senior officer. The surrounding operators instinctively turned toward him. Waiting. Not for suggestions. For orders. As he stepped forward, I caught sight of his face. At first, I thought the rain was playing tricks on my eyes. It couldn't be. I stared harder. 5 years. 5 long years without a single visit. Only the occasional heavily censored email telling us he was safe. The same warm brown eyes. The same determined expression. Just older. Stronger. Marked by years of responsibility. My breath caught in my throat. Anthony? He turned toward my voice. For one brief second. The commander disappeared. All I saw was my older brother. The man who used to teach me how to ride a bicycle. Who scared away bullies when I was little. Who promised before leaving for military training. No matter where they send me, you'll always be my little sister. His eyes widened. Elena? The next moment, he was running. Not walking. Running straight toward me through the pouring rain. Elena. Before I could say anything, he wrapped both arms around me. I completely broke down. All the pain I had tried so hard to hide poured out in uncontrollable sobs. He held me tightly. It's okay. I'm here. I've got you. For several moments neither of us spoke. The rain continued falling around us. Finally, he gently pulled back just enough to look at me. His expression changed instantly. His eyes noticed my soaked dress. My trembling hands. The tears running down my face. What happened? I tried to answer. The words wouldn't come. He wiped away a tear with his thumb. Elena. His voice became softer. Talk to me. I took a shaky breath. They. Another sob interrupted me. They threw me out. His jaw tightened. Who? Daniel's mother. I pointed weakly toward the ballroom. Margaret. What did she do? I looked down. She said. My voice cracked again. That I was too poor to sit with them. Anthony remained completely silent. I continued. She called me low class. I swallowed hard. In front of everyone. His face didn't move. That somehow frightened me even more. My parents couldn't stop her. They stayed quiet because they didn't want Sophia's wedding ruined. I understand why. Fresh tears filled my eyes. But I've never felt so alone. Anthony slowly looked toward the ballroom. His expression had become impossible to read. Calm. Controlled. Dangerously calm. One of the SEAL officers approached. Sir, local law enforcement is still 6 minutes out. Anthony never looked away from the building. Hostage count? Approximately 100 civilians. Confirmed armed suspects? 8, possibly 10. The officer hesitated. They're heavily armed. Anthony gave one short nod. Then he looked back at me. Stay here. No matter what happens. Do not move. I grabbed his sleeve. They have rifles. I know. They're dangerous. I know. They could. He gently placed a hand over mine. His voice remained steady. They picked the wrong building. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Not because the danger had disappeared, but because my brother had arrived. The same brother everyone believed had simply vanished from our lives years ago. I suddenly remembered something. When did you get back? This morning. I stared at him in disbelief. This morning? I wasn't supposed to contact anyone. My mission only officially ended 12 hours ago. I shook my head. We thought. I know. He smiled sadly. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you where I was. Another operator hurried over. Commander. Satellite surveillance confirms no additional hostiles outside. Anthony nodded once. Good. Then his eyes returned to mine. One more question. I nodded. Is Sophia still inside? Yes. My parents too. He inhaled slowly. Understood. His expression hardened. The warmth of an older brother disappeared. In its place stood a United States Navy commander responsible for every life trapped inside that ballroom. He turned toward his team. Every operator immediately faced him. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply waited. Anthony's voice was calm. Clear. Unshakable. Listen carefully. The priority is civilian safety. Rules of engagement remain in effect. No unnecessary risks. We bring everyone home. Every SEAL answered together. Yes, sir. Anthony looked once more at the shattered ballroom doors. Then he gave the order that changed everything. SEAL team. His eyes narrowed. Clear the building. The moment Anthony gave the order, the entire team sprang into action. There was no hesitation. No shouting. No panic. Only disciplined precision. 2 Navy SEALs moved toward the front entrance while another pair circled to the rear of the building. Others positioned themselves near the shattered windows, communicating through secure headsets with calm, measured voices. Anthony stood at the center of it all, issuing commands with absolute confidence. Bravo team, cover the east hallway. Alpha team, breach on my mark. Medical unit, stand by. Everything happened so fast that I could barely keep up. I watched from the entrance, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst through my chest. Inside the ballroom, the attackers had no idea what was coming. One of them was still yelling at the terrified guests. If anybody moves, somebody dies. Another was dragging Richard Whitmore toward the stage. Richard had completely fallen apart. His expensive tuxedo was wrinkled and stained, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "I'll transfer every dollar," he pleaded. "I'll give you everything I own." The masked leader laughed. "You still don't understand. This isn't about getting your money back. It's about sending a message." Margaret collapsed beside her husband, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Please. We'll leave the country. We'll disappear. Just let my family go." The gunman looked down at her with cold eyes. "You should have thought about that before your husband stole from people who never forgive." Daniel remained hidden beneath the overturned dining table. Every few seconds he peeked over the edge, only to duck back down again. The same man who had looked so confident in his tailored tuxedo now looked like a frightened child. Several guests noticed. Their expressions changed. Some with disappointment. Others with disbelief. The image of the fearless businessman they had admired only hours earlier was crumbling before their eyes. Outside, Anthony raised a clenched fist. Every operator froze. Silence. Even the rain seemed quieter. He counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The front doors exploded inward. At the exact same moment, another team shattered the side windows and entered from multiple directions. United States Navy. "Drop your weapons." The ballroom erupted into chaos. Several attackers spun around in shock. One fired wildly toward the entrance. Before he could fire a second shot, 2 SEALs tackled him to the ground with incredible speed. Another criminal attempted to run toward the hostages. A flashbang detonated nearby. The brilliant flash and deafening bang disoriented everyone for a split second. The attacker stumbled. A Navy operator closed the distance instantly, disarming him before pinning him face down against the marble floor. Every movement looked perfectly coordinated. Years of training unfolded before my eyes. Within seconds, gunfire echoed throughout the ballroom. Short, controlled bursts. Glass shattered. Tables overturned. Guests screamed as they crawled toward safety. Anthony entered last. Unlike the others, he never rushed. He moved with complete control, scanning every corner as he advanced through the room. His calmness seemed almost unbelievable. An attacker suddenly appeared from behind one of the pillars and raised his rifle toward a group of civilians. Anthony reacted instantly. "Weapon!" Before the gunman could pull the trigger, 2 SEALs neutralized the threat. The rifle clattered across the floor. Another criminal grabbed a terrified woman and held her in front of him as a human shield. "Back off." One operator calmly replied. "You don't want to do this." "I'll kill her." The woman cried uncontrollably. For a tense moment, nobody moved. Anthony stepped forward. His voice remained remarkably calm. "Let her go." The attacker laughed nervously. "You think I'm scared of your uniform?" Anthony never blinked. "No. I think you're scared because you know you've already lost." The man's eyes shifted nervously toward the exits. Almost every member of his group had already been captured. Several lay handcuffed on the floor. Others were surrounded. His confidence vanished. In one desperate motion, he pushed the hostage aside and tried to raise his weapon. He never got the chance. Within a heartbeat, 3 SEALs brought him down without harming the woman. She collapsed into tears as medical personnel rushed to help her. The ballroom slowly grew quiet. One by one, the remaining attackers surrendered. Weapons hit the floor. Hands went into the air. Federal agents and local police finally arrived, rushing inside to take custody of the captured criminals. The entire operation had lasted only a matter of minutes. Minutes. That was all it took. The same armed gang that had terrorized over 100 people had been completely dismantled. Guests slowly emerged from beneath tables and behind pillars. Many looked around in disbelief. Some hugged complete strangers. Others simply cried. Doctors checked the injured while officers escorted the criminals outside in handcuffs. Richard Whitmore remained sitting on the floor, staring blankly ahead. His face had lost every trace of confidence. Margaret still trembled uncontrollably. She clutched Daniel's arms so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Daniel finally crawled out from beneath the table. His tuxedo was torn. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then, for the first time, the Whitmore family truly looked at the man who had just saved their lives. Anthony. Standing tall in his spotless white navy dress uniform. His medals gleamed beneath the ballroom lights. The command insignia on his shoulders caught everyone's attention. Conversations stopped. One police captain approached Anthony, saluted respectfully, and began giving his report. "Commander, the suspects are secured." Anthony returned the salute. "Excellent. Any civilian fatalities?" "No, sir. Several minor injuries. No deaths." A wave of relief swept through the room. Guests began whispering among themselves. Did he just call him commander? United States Navy? I've never seen an operation like that. Who is he? Then someone asked the question that changed the atmosphere of the entire ballroom. A businessman looked toward me, then back at Anthony. "Commander. Are you related to her?" Anthony didn't answer immediately. He turned his head toward me. Our eyes met across the ballroom. For a moment, I saw the same protective older brother who used to walk me home from school so no one would bother me. Then he walked straight toward me. Every step echoed through the silent hall. The Navy SEALs instinctively moved aside, creating a clear path for their commanding officer. The guests watched in complete silence. Anthony stopped beside me. Without saying a word, he gently placed his hand on my shoulder. Then he looked at the businessman who had asked the question. "Yes." His voice was calm. "She is my younger sister." A ripple of shock spread across the ballroom. "What? His sister?" the girl Margaret threw out. "No. That can't be." Margaret's face drained of color. Daniel looked from Anthony to me, then back again as though his mind refused to accept what he was seeing. Anthony slowly turned toward them. His polished black shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as he crossed the room. Nobody dared get in his way. Even the police officers instinctively stepped aside. He stopped directly in front of Margaret and Daniel. Neither of them could meet his eyes. Anthony's gaze settled on Margaret first. "So," he said quietly, "you're the woman who decided my sister wasn't worthy of sitting with her own family." Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her confidence had completely vanished. She looked nothing like the elegant woman who had humiliated me only an hour earlier. Anthony continued. "You called her low class." Silence. "You said there was no place for her among your family." Margaret's lips trembled. I didn't know." Anthony interrupted her. "No. You didn't. You didn't know who her brother was." His voice became firmer. "But that's exactly the problem." He glanced around the ballroom so everyone could hear. "You believed respect depended on someone's bank account. You judged a person's worth by the clothes they wore, by the car they drove, by the family they were born into." His eyes returned to Margaret. "And because of that, you failed to see the character standing right in front of you." The room was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Anthony pointed toward me. This woman. My sister. The same woman you insulted. She stayed here all afternoon helping guests. She welcomed strangers with kindness. She expected nothing in return. You pushed her into the rain. He paused. And while she sat outside alone, he looked around the room. She was the safest person in this entire building. Several guests lowered their heads. Anthony slowly faced Daniel. You. Daniel swallowed hard. I want to apologize. Anthony raised a hand. No. You'll listen. Daniel immediately fell silent. You stood there while your mother humiliated Elena. You watched. You heard every word. You said nothing. Daniel stared at the floor. I was trying to avoid making things worse. Anthony's expression hardened. No. You were protecting yourself. There's a difference. Daniel's shoulders slumped. Anthony took one step closer. When these criminals entered, you hid. When your mother cried for help, you hid. When innocent people needed courage, you hid. His voice remained controlled. I don't judge a man because he feels fear. Everyone feels fear. I judge a man by what he chooses to do despite that fear. Daniel couldn't answer. There was nothing he could say. Anthony turned toward the hundreds of guests watching. I've served with sailors from every background imaginable. Some grew up in wealthy neighborhoods. Others grew up with almost nothing. I've seen millionaires stand beside mechanics. College graduates beside high school dropouts. When bullets start flying. He looked around the room. None of that matters. What matters is whether the person beside you has the courage to protect others. Several Navy SEALs quietly nodded. Anthony continued. In the military, we don't ask how much money your parents have. We don't ask what neighborhood you came from. We ask one question. Can we trust you? His words settled over the room like a heavy weight. Even Richard Whitmore slowly lowered his head. Anthony faced him next. I've already been briefed on why these men came here tonight. Richard's eyes widened. Anthony's expression remained cold. Your business decisions placed every person in this room in danger. Richard whispered. I made mistakes. Anthony replied immediately. No. A mistake is forgetting an appointment. A mistake is taking the wrong exit. He looked Richard directly in the eyes. Fraud is a choice. Richard had no response. Federal agents nearby exchanged quiet glances. Anthony stepped back. My team came here to save innocent lives. He looked toward the frightened guests. Not reputations. The ballroom remained silent. Then, something happened that no one expected. Margaret slowly walked toward me. The same woman who had ordered me out of the wedding. The same woman who had called me poor. Tears streamed down her face. She stopped only a few feet away. Then, in front of every guest, she dropped to her knees. I'm so ashamed. Her voice broke. I judged you without knowing you. I believed money made us better than everyone else. She looked up at me through tears. But tonight, you showed more dignity than I ever have. She folded her trembling hands together. Elena, please forgive me. For several long seconds, I simply looked at Margaret. The entire ballroom was silent. Only minutes earlier, she had stood in this very room with her head held high, convinced that her family's wealth made them untouchable. She had looked down on me as if I were invisible. Now she was kneeling in front of me, trembling. It almost didn't feel real. Daniel slowly stepped forward as well. His eyes were red, whether from fear or shame, I couldn't tell. He stopped beside his mother. Then, to everyone's surprise, he lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Elena." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have stopped her. You were our guest, and Sophia's sister. I failed you." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me remembered every cruel word. Every laugh. Every silent face that had watched me walk away. Another part of me looked around the room and realized something. Life had already humbled every person standing there. No punishment I could give them would ever be greater than what they had experienced tonight. I took a slow breath. Then I spoke. "I accept your apology." Several people looked up in surprise. "But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened." Margaret nodded immediately, tears still falling. "I know." I continued. "You didn't hurt me because I was poor. You hurt me because you believed someone's value could be measured by money." I looked around the ballroom. "I hope none of us ever make that mistake again." No one argued. No one even attempted to defend themselves. Anthony smiled quietly beside me. Not because I had forgiven them, but because I had refused to become bitter. At that moment, Sophia slowly walked toward us. Her wedding dress was stained, her makeup ruined by tears. She stopped in front of me, unable to lift her eyes. "I'm so sorry." The words came out between sobs. I was scared. I thought if I spoke up, the wedding would fall apart. She covered her face with both hands. "But when I watched you leave, I hated myself." I stepped closer. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "I failed you as your sister." For a moment neither of us moved. Then I wrapped my arms around her. She immediately broke down crying against my shoulder. "We're still sisters," I whispered. "But never stay silent when someone is being humiliated again." She nodded over and over. "I promise." Our parents joined us moments later. My mother hugged both of us so tightly that none of us could hold back our tears any longer. My father looked at me with eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have stood beside you." I squeezed his hand. "I know you wanted to." He nodded silently. Anthony placed a reassuring hand on Dad's shoulder. "What's important is what we do from today forward." Just then, several federal agents approached Richard Whitmore. One of them spoke politely but firmly. "Mr. Whitmore, we need you to come with us." Richard didn't argue. The proud businessman who had once believed money could solve every problem quietly extended his hands. As the agents escorted him away, he looked back at his family one last time. His empire. His reputation. Everything he had spent decades building had collapsed in a single night. The guests slowly began leaving the ballroom. Many stopped to shake Anthony's hand. Others came to me personally. One elderly woman smiled warmly. "I owe you an apology too." I looked confused. "You do?" "I watched your humiliation." I said nothing. She lowered her head. "I won't make that mistake again." One by one, more guests came forward. Some apologized. Some thanked Anthony and the SEAL team. Others simply admitted that the night's events had changed the way they viewed people. The ballroom that had once been filled with arrogance now felt strangely humble. As the last emergency vehicles prepared to leave, one of Anthony's SEAL officers approached. "Commander, our transport is ready." Anthony nodded. "I'll be there in a minute." The officer saluted before walking away. I looked at my brother. "So, you're leaving already?" He smiled. "Duty never really ends." I laughed softly through my tears. 5 years without seeing you. And now you're leaving again. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small Navy Challenge coin. It was beautifully engraved with an eagle, an anchor, and a trident. I carried this through every deployment. He closed my fingers around it. Whenever you think you're alone, remember this. You never are. Fresh tears filled my eyes. I missed you. I missed you too, kid. We hugged one last time. As he walked toward the waiting vehicles, every member of his team stood at attention. Anthony climbed into the lead vehicle. Moments later, the convoy quietly disappeared into the Seattle night. I stood there watching until the last taillight vanished. The rain had finally stopped. The clouds slowly parted, revealing a clear sky above the city. As I looked across the calm waters of Elliott Bay, I realized something I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Money can buy beautiful weddings. It can build mansions. It can purchase expensive cars, designer clothes, and the admiration of people who only care about status. But it cannot buy courage. It cannot buy honor. It cannot buy integrity. Those things are earned through the choices we make when nobody is watching. That night, the richest family in the room lost everything they believed made them important. And the ordinary girl they had called low class walked away with something far more valuable. Her dignity. If this story reminded you that true worth is measured by character, not wealth, status, or a family name, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. You never know whose perspective it might change. And remember, respect is never earned by what you own. It is earned by who you choose to be.